This week's news from the tubes on F5 Live Refreshing Technology is proudly powered by Malwarebytes. Whether you use a PC, a Mac, or a mobile device, Malwarebytes Premium is the company's strongest protection ever. It fights threats that traditional antivirus software can't stop, plus it actively blocks threats like worms, rogues, dialers, trojans, spyware, and a whole lot more. It allows you to use your computer and mobile devices with confidence and peace of mind. To learn more and to get a special price, you can go to f5live.tv/malwarebytes. So we're going to go back to AI for a couple of minutes here, because we talked about earlier how machines learn, and now we'll talk about how that ends up badly. We've talked a lot about how, current events and things like that with AI tend to be useless, because it's not constantly ingesting new information. It's built on a particular model that's already built. And that may or may not have been what went horribly wrong this week when an article was published to a website called Racetrack that was syndicated through MSN, Microsoft Start, and the widgets in Windows. The article title was Brandon Hunter Useless at 42. Now, there are always editorial articles about professional athletes. Being called useless is not unusual in that realm, especially if you're a basketball player at 42. However, the thing that makes this one different is it was not editorial. This was an obituary. Brandon Hunter had died suddenly during a hot yoga class. He collapsed, and that was it. And this AI-written obituary does two things. Well, I guess three things. One, insults him straight off the bat. Brandon Hunter useless at 42. It's not wrong, but it's not right. So it insults him. It gets facts really wrong. And it's insulting to everybody involved. It definitely shows what goes wrong with AI under a number of circumstances. Some of my favorite quotes, which make absolutely no sense. Oh, yeah. The third thing is, it never actually says that he died. It's an obituary. It doesn't actually say that he died at any point. It calls him useless. It says that he was handed.
Handed.
Yep.
Handed what?
He has handed away. Which obviously handed and passed. It was a thesaurus fail that happened there. But because of that thesaurus fail, it never actually says that he died, just that he's useless. But at one point it claimed that during his 2 years in the NBA, he played 67 video games. So has my brother. I don't know how that's relevant to his NBA career. But he does have a career high of 17 factors. 17 factors of what? I don't know. Don't worry about it. The whole thing makes absolutely no sense. It makes up a number of things and then has some massive thesaurus fails. The handed away. We were having a conversation earlier today at Strike where somebody's like, handed, passed. It was a thesaurus fail. Oh, he was handed away. Okay, I get it. But like the grammar is all over the place. who beforehand performed for the Boston Celtics and Orlando Magic, has handed away at the age of 42, as introduced by Ohio males basketball coach Jeff Bowles. Oh yeah. What was introduced? Don't worry about it. His hand. The
Yeah.
whole thing is
Well,
chaos.
the
So,
prediction engine didn't predict well.
yeah.
It didn't predict it predicted words, but not the right words.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
right? Because it's following a script, right? And like, again, it's like Mad Libs. It's
Yeah.
Mad Libs, but normally it's filling in. Normally it's not so Mad Libs, but if it messes up, then it's really Mad Libs, right? And
Yeah.
that's what it's doing. It's Mad Libs, and
And I
so
think I
now,
think that this system has something built into it similar to like an 8th grader where they go and they choose certain words and they have word replace it with a synonym.
well, that's also a way to launder plagiarism, right? Because if
Right.
they uh, 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 there's also uh, there, there's also a way to that's a way to say like, oh, if they're copying things word for word, they can just change a few words here.
Right.
But
Which is what
realistically, I
which
don't
is what
think.
middle schoolers do in book reports.
Yeah, sure, exactly. That's what it does. That's what they do. So I mean, look, I mean, so I think there's obviously two aspects to the story. One aspect is how
Mhm.
poorly AI can perform. Another aspect to it is MSN, which I have talked about.
Yeah.
I don't know if did we ever do an episode about that on the show about how bad that's kind of tabloid quality stuff is on the Windows widget, which is powered by MSN.
Yeah,
So
I don't think we
the
have. The whole system, by the way, is now called Microsoft Start in all of its places. The
so
underlying thing is all coming from Microsoft Start now.
so I'm looking right now, and I don't know if I see anything that terrible in my feed, but I have seen some really horrible stuff when you click on that, like the widget board, which is built into Windows 11 and 10, uh, and like so there was one I wrote an article about this like maybe I don't know 4 or 5 months ago. It's like reading, it's like being in the supermarket checkout aisle, and this is not to say um, this is not to say that they are like because they're AI. I mean they're bad. These things aren't bad AI. They're just like trashy stuff. So, they have things that is, they put things in there that was extremely, uh, political stuff, conspiracy theory oriented. There was one that was like, I'm a doomsday prepper and here's what I'm doing. Lots and lots of the same story got repeated over and over again for me about somebody claiming that they temporarily died and went to hell, and here's what hell looks like, and they play Rihanna music over and over again. Um, and and seemingly, I kept getting that story because whoever wrote it, kept republishing it,
Mm-hmm.
um, like with a new dateline. So whatever system MSN uses just kept picking it up over and over again. So I'm looking right now at MSN and like, here are some things that are on there on the homepage for me. Are you still conscious after you die? Researchers weigh in. I guess that's not so bad as the ones I got about are you going to hell or not. Uh, uh, let's see. Wasabi is now Veeam ready. Cut storage costs. Oh, that's an ad.
I
Uh,
I love
uh,
wasabi.
yes. Why AI governance is absolutely crucial. The early Alzheimer's treatment that captured our attention by Prime Women Media. Like some of these things are from like, should you be taking health advice from some of these things that we've never heard of?
Probably not.
Like, uh, she finds you should add this spice to your coffee every day for brain health. Oh, here's one that's like, I don't know. I'm not saying that this is like the worst, but like this is a little bit like in a just weird to have as like a default for people to see. Why I don't believe in God. Side post emotion like, oh, here. I mean, it's just like it's like the stuff you see at the bottom of a lot of web pages.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, scoop upworthy. Let's see. Like some of these things really. Uh, whoa, here we go. Stars Insider. What you might not know about angels. Like this is just what being left-handed could say about your personality.
I'm going to throw out a pitch real quick.
Yeah.
I think that it specifically picks stuff that you will not be interested in. Because all of my stuff, I don't have any of that. Some of those I would read out of pure weird curiosity, but I'm also the kind of guy
Yes, me too.
that likes to watch videos about flat earth because hearing people talk themselves in circles is always fun. But the only thing that's in mine right now, starting from the top, 6 things you feel, 18 movies from, 39 southern phrases, uh, 10 surprising points, 14 childhood myths. I hate listicles. Hate them.
Yeah.
Microsoft has to know that. And yet, my
Right.
whole thing is listicles. As if it's tempting me. We know you're going to hate this. However, don't you want to check this one out? No, I don't. Thank you, though. Can we trade?
Yeah, I mean, I clicked something. I must have given in to just see how bad they were. So it's hard to say, but I'm just saying there's a lot of trash in here. So MSN, first of all, does a terrible job of uh, does a does a terrible job of weeding this stuff in and out. I'm not
Yeah.
even sure whether there's an actual human that looks at it. Um, then
No,
we have the problem of AI.
they fired the entire Microsoft News team. So no, there's no human being looking at them.
Well, I should say though that like a couple of times when I wrote to the PR person I have there about like a really bad story that came up on here, they're like, "Oh yes, we're sorry, we have processes in place to screen for those sorts of things," making it sound like there was a person who looks at it, but probably, but maybe not. Like, by the way, if there is a person whose job it is to look at, I have nothing but empathy for that person because, like, they probably don't have a lot of either time to do it, and
Yeah.
they're probably incentivized to let things through, which is the same problem with AI with screening of AI articles. So, one thing that really gets my goat, no matter which door you open, is the is when people say um, is when we you have AI generated articles like the one that you just cited, and the response that we usually get to that is like, well, somebody messed up, some human messed up, like there was supposed to be a fact checker, and uh, the fact checker didn't do their job, right? And it's always like it's that's always the story. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
there must have been a human who was responsible for that AI, and they should be fired, right?
Yeah.
Because they let it through. But my sense of that is so. First of all, I think a lot of what's happening with these, I think in a lot of cases when the AIs are generating these things, there is a human somewhere involved because they probably don't have it integrated into the CMS. So, I mean, there may be tools that do integrate into CMS, but I think most people are being cheap. And what they're probably doing is going to ChatGPT or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
asking it to write giving it a very brief prompt, taking the output, Control A, select all, copy, going into WordPress or whatever CMS they have, hitting paste, and publishing it.
Yeah.
So, uh, so and the person doing it may very well not be an editorial person at all, someone with any
True.
sense of editorial at all. But if you, but there's this constant belief that like, oh, we're just one or two humans away from solving these problems. Like, oh, you know, this would all be fine if you just had a human, made sure that the human fact checker checked everything. Well, the amount and quality, like, yes, some of the things that stood out in that are so egregious that anyone who read it for a second would have caught them.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of very subtle mistakes in these that are harder to catch. And you're probably not being given a lot, if even if there were a person whose job it was to just fact check the AIs, we know that that person's incentive would be to get the stuff up in like a minute or something. They,
Yep.
if
Yep.
you, and the types of errors that the AIs make are so hard to predict that it's really hard to to edit an AI. It is harder to edit an AI than it is to edit a person. I had I have looked at both, and usually when I hire a freelance writer, first of all, I have some faith in that person that they know what they're talking about. So if there's some aspect of the article that is above my head, right? Like, oh, like we used to have a power supply writer, and he was so fluent in like the minutia of like
Yeah.
voltages and voltage controls and stuff like that. And so I could read his articles and I'd edit his articles, but man, there were things in his articles that were a bit above my head. But I knew he knew what he was talking about. It made logical, coherent sense. Okay, I trust you know what you're doing here. The errors that AIs make are all over the place. So you would need some, including some very basic facts. So you would need somebody who was a a subject matter expert on that exact subject, and they would need to go out and actually Google some things. So like if it said there that that person like scored 50 points or something,
Mm-hmm.
like that sounds credible because the person was a basketball player or whatever,
Right.
but you better go check that because it might have been 40 points,
Right.
right? Or not at all. So or if it even says something really throwaway like, oh, they were born on uh, you know they were born on Independence Day. And you'd say, oh, great, they're born on July 4th. And then you go and look and they're born July 2nd or something. Like you
Or
you
or
don't
on
you
Canadian
can't
Independence
trust a
Day.
single thing they said. Right. You can't take a single word that they said for granted. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where errors are going to slip through, even if you have somebody who's really good. And
Yeah.
then you have someone who's under time pressure. They've got to do a turnaround in a couple of minutes. And it's the most thankless job on earth because here you are, you probably were trained to be an editor or a writer, and you're like, oh, I'm cleaning up after this worthless machine.
Right.
Like, that's got to be the most thankless job on earth, right? So
Agreed.
no one is ever going to get that job right. So uh, I mean, I'm not trying to go off on a tangent here. What I'm saying is, like, human fact checkers are not going to solve this AI problem.
True. Yeah. Now, this one in particular could have been caught as garbage just from the headline. If a human read useless at
Yes,
what? Hold on.
yes, it's pretty plain.
Yeah. But like you said, this is not the norm. The norm is I'm going to do the math in my head, 8,300,000,000 something is right. That looks like the right number. Keep moving.
Right, exactly. You have to really, really check. There was and also just little things like I don't know, shades of meaning. Even on the best AIs get lost.
Mm-hmm.
So I was reading one about sports reporting, and there was some local newspaper that had used AIs for sports reporting, And one of the things was something like one team was beating the other team by like 40 points, and the other team scored like 7 points in the fourth quarter. They were still down by like a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
it said something like they almost came back or something like that. They made a run at it in the fourth quarter by scoring 7 points because it didn't see the shade of meaning of like actually 7 points is pretty worthless. Like that's
Yeah.
right. It, so it's those little pieces of meaning that matter,
Yeah.
and also that show you that they're really not thinking.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, if you need a good example that computers and AIs are not thinking, calling a recently deceased man useless, certainly one of them. And there's a number, like you said, there's a number of things that come out of this. For me, the most important is Microsoft's got to figure out its partner program, because yikes, is all I have to say about that. Hello, YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of F5 Live Refreshing Technology. If you did, please subscribe to the channel down below, and of course, hit the notification bell because we know that subscriptions don't mean much on YouTube anymore. If you've got topics that you'd like us to talk about in the future, please comment them down below. And if you'd like to not follow us on YouTube, there's lots of ways that you can follow along with our content by going to plughitslive.com/subscribe. There you'll see all of our shows and all of the ways that you can watch, listen, and follow along.